Hi y'all, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a minute since I've hopped on here and shared about how my reading is going, so I figured it is high time, quarter past the time, to share all of the books that I've read so far this year and let you know my thoughts on them. The first book that I wanted to talk about is A Gamble at Sunset by Vanessa Riley. This is a historical romance that is set in Victorian London, and it features a Black female main character named Georgina Wilcox. She is the daughter to a coal tycoon, and he has recently passed away, the tycoon. And now, after a lot of things that went on between her siblings, particularly her older sister Catherine and her husband, the family is currently in some financial problems. And we follow her as she gets to know a young musician, and they end up in the situation where they are in a fake engagement. And there's a bunch of hijinks and different things that go on throughout the story that was very entertaining and very amusing. So I rated this book a 4-star. I overall really enjoyed it. It was very lighthearted for the most part, even though it did feature some, I guess, harder topics like loss and dealing with a sickness that you don't know much about, not her, but one of her family members. And yeah, struggling with finding something that you really enjoy and you love, but then knowing that there's different circumstances that are going to keep you from being with that particular person. So overall, like I said, I enjoyed this book, and it is the first book in a series. So I will be continuing on with it to see what other, shenanigans these sisters are going to get into. Staying on brand, I read The Secret Diaries of Charles Ignatius Sancho by Patterson Joseph, and this is a historical fiction novel that follows the titled character, and he actually is a real person that lived in, I believe it was in Victorian, I want to say this was, 18th century England, and he was an anomaly. He was a person who was born into slavery. He ended up, being plucked out of Grenada at a young age and was taken to England, where he did a lot of different magnificent things, but also very ordinary things. Like, it was a balance of him doing things like, speaking and reciting poems in front of royalty and, nobility, but also he was a husband and a father to his various children. I believe he had 5. And I really was interested in this book. It came out a few years ago, and I actually was gifted this by Henry Holt Books. So shout out to you guys for sending this to me. But I only just now got to it. I actually listened to the audio and also followed along in the book. I definitely highly recommend the audio because it also features an interview between Patterson Joseph, the author, and Marjorie Blackman, who wrote Noughts and Crosses and a bunch of other prominent books. And I think the interview lasted about 45 minutes, but it was so good. It was such a great, I guess, with lack of a term, I guess I'm hungry, a dessert after this meal of a book. I really appreciated Patterson's passion for this character. You could tell he did a lot of research, and also it is not a narrative nonfiction, it is a historical fiction novel, so that's something to keep in mind, because for what he did not know or could not find out, he pretty much filled in the gaps with his imagination. So, which is pretty much what historical fiction tends to be. But this was just great. It's always good to learn about little known Black characters that were living in, in this time period, especially in London at the time. I feel like a lot of times when we see period dramas or different books that are set in this time, Black people are not featured. So I'm always looking forward to and always looking out for books like this. I've actually been a fan of Patterson Joseph for a while because I watched Timeless, which was a show that was all about, people going to time travel into different parts of history and different activities and adventures that they went through. So he was in this book, he was in this show, and then I found out he was writing this book. So it made me even more, interested in picking this up. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this. I believe I gave this a 4-star. If I didn't, then I will correct it on the screen somewhere. But yeah, definitely recommend it if you are looking to read more books about little known Black characters in history. Next is a nonfiction read, and this is Church Girl, A Gospel Vision to Encourage and Challenge Black Christian Women by Dr. Sarita T. Lyons. And this is a powerhouse of a book. I know that, actually, I don't think I've talked enough about the books, which I'm going to do a video about that, about talking about books that I did not hype up enough in 2024, or in general, the books I just don't talk about enough that I really enjoyed and want to recommend. So it'll be like a general genre-less recommendations video, but I digress. I really loved, what book was this? Where is it? Where did I have it? Oh, okay, it's right up here. I really enjoyed Dangerous Jesus. I read this last year, and it was one of my top books of 2024. I said this is like a book that everybody should read, no matter if you're Black, you're white, if you're a Christian or not, that every person should read this book. This book, I have similar feelings about, or similar vibes. However, I do think that this is obviously written to encourage and challenge Black Christian women. I do still think that this book is beneficial to anybody, just to get perspective. So essentially, Sarita, or Dr. Sarita Lyons, she shares her testimony in this book of how she came to faith, that she grew up in church. She was a church girl. She grew up going to church, every single day she could. And when she went away to school, her ideas about Christianity or what it looks like was really challenged. She went to a HBCU, and it's not particularly, because she went to a HBCU, but when she was there, she was introduced to all these different kinds of religions and belief systems that were, rooted in, or began in different countries in Africa. She had a lot of things that was pushing up against her Christian faith. And so she shared that within her testimony, and essentially she wrote this book because she wanted to encourage Black Christian women that you can see yourself in the body of Christ, and you can celebrate your Blackness, celebrate who you are, celebrate your culture without compromising your faith. So I really appreciated her just really breaking down a lot of themes that I was really curious about, Black girls being missing in the church, and how that correlated with Black girls being missing, in the world, and different things like that. The importance of rest, the importance of, spending time in the Word and praying, the importance of having, real accountability and real friends that will keep you encouraged, but also will challenge you, like the subtitle says. And so I love this book. I definitely tabbed it a lot. I'm looking forward to revisiting this in the future. I have a few books that I've read in the past that I go back to from time to time and revisit. So this was definitely one of them. I give this a 5-star rating, and I definitely recommend it to literally anybody. Next up, I read The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. And this is a historical fiction novel that is following the life of Belle Green. She was the personal librarian for J.P. Morgan, the famous J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was a collector of many different first editions of books, of different Bibles, manuscripts, all the things. And so he hired her to be his personal curator. But the gag is that she was pretending to be white. She was passing as white. Not just her, but her family. So her siblings and her mom were living in New York City and passing for white. This was, I believe, during the, I want to say it was like 1910. I'm gonna give you the answer right now. 1905. So this is early 1900s. And yeah, it was, I think this book was so interesting. It was so well done. I really appreciated it. I was really intrigued by Belle's story. Obviously, it's historical fiction. So this was based off of the author's research, and then also them kind of going from their own, or specifically Victoria's point of view, her upbringing, the things that her family had experienced in the past. Marie Benedict, actually, she stumbled upon Belle's story years ago, and then she wanted to write this story for a long time, but then she realized she really couldn't write this story, from a Black woman's perspective without a Black woman, assisting or helping her write this story, and really get that, understanding of how her family, interacted and the things that Belle probably struggled with personally, with things she had to sacrifice in order to be in the position that she was in. So overall, like, I do recommend reading the author's note. I love reading author's notes in books. They're so informative, and I really love this one because not only was this a great story and the authors were able to learn so much more about Belle, but they were actually able to develop a really tight-knit relationship and friendship from this book and from writing this during the pandemic. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. I believe I gave this 4.5 stars. Yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars because it was great. The only thing that I couldn't give it a 5-star was because there were quite a few spicier scenes that weren't fade to black. And when I have to skip around for books, I can't give it a perfect 10 or a perfect 5 for that. But overall, it was a great read, and I do recommend it if you are interested, again, in little known or lesser known Black figures in history. Next, I read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I actually listened to the audiobook with this, which I highly recommend because it is a novel in verse. Yes, a novel in verse. I've had this book for a very long time. Don't mind the Ollie's Outlet sticker. But yeah, I've owned this book for a very long time. I got this on discount, and I obviously saw the Walter D. Myers Award on here, and I've read a few other books by Jason Reynolds that I really enjoyed. Particularly, it was a lot of his nonfiction, so it's my first fiction from him, but this is the one that I feel like is most well known. And in this book, we're following a young man whose brother was killed. And it's him figuring out a way to follow the rules that he was taught growing up, which is to, get revenge. And that's all I'm going to say about the premise of the book. But this was so emotional. I was very emotional reading this book. It was so, like, I don't want to say painful, but yeah, it was a little painful because it felt so real. I don't know if it's because of the audio, listening to the audiobook and hearing, Jason Reynolds narrate this book. But I just felt like this really could resonate with a lot of people, just about, violence and how it's really is senseless, and how one violent act can generate another one to generate another one to generate another one, and who all is being affected by this. So yes, it deserves all the awards. It has all of these. It deserves them because it is a really, really phenomenal book. And yeah, I already knew I was going to love this book, so I guess I was a little biased, but it definitely didn't disappoint me. Oh yeah, I gave this 5 stars. Next is Deacon King Kong by James McBride. And this is another one that has been on my shelves for a long time. And I think I picked this up in a little free library maybe 2 years ago. And this is a story. Yes, this is the same James McBride that wrote, is it the same? No, that's Personal Librarian. No. So this is the same, this is the same James McBride that wrote Miracle at St. Anna. And I believe he wrote The Heavenly Grocery something. I'll put the picture up here. But yes, this was a book that I really enjoyed this book. I believe I gave this book 4 stars. Yes. And we are following a guy, a man that was living in, I believe this is in Brooklyn, set in Brooklyn. Is it set in Brooklyn? Yes, it's set in Brooklyn. And I'm just going to read the first line or first couple lines of it. So it says, in September 1969, an old church deacon known as Sportcoat shuffles into the courtyard of the Causeway Housing Projects in South Brooklyn, pulls a .38 from his pocket, and in front of everybody shoots the project's drug dealer at point blank range. The reasons for this burst of violence and the consequences that spring from it are the heart of Deacon King Kong. So yeah, that's the premise. That pretty much is what happens. But what takes place before, after, during this event, this major event, it just really shows a, how do I say, not a kaleidoscope, but a tapestry of what was taking place during this time period. I believe this is set, 1969, late 60s in Brooklyn. And this was at the beginning of the crack epidemic. And we get to see how various communities, the Italian community, Irish community, the Black community, the Puerto Rican community was affected by this event that took place. Obviously, this isn't a real event, but the effects of this change in drug dealing and whatnot is definitely seeping through this book. It's really a story about a community. You get to hear a lot of different perspectives from various members of the community, and yeah, this is such a human book. I don't know what else to say. It's a great picture of humanity and what it looks like to grieve, what it looks like to have a family, what it looks like to not just have a family that you are born into or that you create with your spouse, but to have a family that you create as far as your friends and who supports you and who doesn't, and the different prejudices that people have and how they can be broken down by finding some sameness between each other. So another banger. I mean, so far our reading has been really good. I'm not gonna lie to you. Oh gosh. All right, next is The Frozen River by Ariel Lahone, and this is a historical fiction mystery book. Yeah, I would say it's around there. I don't know what it's called. It's labeled as historical fiction per book of the month. So yeah, it's mostly historical fiction with a little bit of mystery kind of sprinkled in there. But here we are following one of the, like, not the first midwife, but one of like the most, how do I say this? I'm just going to read the little blurb. So it says, this is his gripping historical mystery inspired by the life and diary of Martha Ballard, a renowned 18th century midwife who defied the legal system and wrote herself into American history. So yeah, Martha was a midwife during this time, and we are following her as she is, she discovers a body in the river. The body is found. She doesn't discover it, but a body is found. And because she's a midwife, she ultimately is like the medical examiner. She's kind of like a jack of all trades for the community, which is a small community in Maine. And this is during one of like the most frigid winters that they've ever had. And we're following her like throughout a whole, like from the very beginning of the winter when it starts till when it ends, and the events that take place all throughout it. And so it's not really just about Martha, but it's about the different members of the community. I'm a community girly, what can I say? I love books about community. But yeah, this is about different members of the community and how she, as the midwife, and because she's like the resident like doctor and everything, she is engrafted into the lives of all of these different individuals and different families. And her children are also kind of in the midst of all of that. She has a few daughters that help her with her patients and her clients. And I really enjoyed this book a lot. I saw a lot of people talk about it when it first came out last year, and I was kind of like, is it worth the hype? Is it all that great? I personally liked it a lot. I know a couple people one person in particular who's read it who was the biggest fan of it. She felt it was a little slow, and it was a little slow to begin with, but once we start to get familiar with some of the characters that are introduced and kind of see who's important, but like how their actions are affecting Martha and her family and other people that she cares about. I'm trying to be a little vague here. Yeah, you get a real appreciation for all that she is, or all that Ariel is explaining and sharing in this book. Another great author's note. I really appreciated the author's note in this one as well. I like getting background on how people, especially historical fiction, on how people come to the decision to pick a particular person to write about and all that they did to research and find out about this individual's life and the events that took place in their lives. So I gave this book, it might be either a 4.5 or a 5-star. I think I was going back and forth with it. Yeah, but overall, I'll put the rating here on the screen, but I did really enjoy this book. I didn't really not enjoy any of the books I read. If I did enjoy it, I DNF'd it. But I really enjoyed this book a lot, and I do recommend it if you are looking for like a little, like a historical fiction book that is also mixed with a little mystery, because the mystery was interesting. It had me. I was like flipping. A lot of people said that they were flipping through the pages, even though it's a pretty thick book. I want to say it's over 400 pages. So it's a little, and the writing is small. But it was definitely intriguing, and it had my attention the entire time. Next, I read The House of Plain Truth by Donna Hemmons, and again, another one, this was an anticipated read for me in 2024, so I finally got my hands on it. I actually read this for most of my trip. I went on a cruise in March, and I read this for most of my trip to like finish it up. This is a story that is following this is a story following not a young woman, but a older woman actually named Pearline, and she is a, Jamaican native, and she has been living in the States for over 30 years. She's come back to Jamaica because her father is very ill, and her sisters were calling her back to, say her final goodbyes. In the midst of the final goodbyes, she is tasked with a mission, and she is so focused on that mission, she's not going to let anyone get in her way. It has a lot to do with generational trauma, family secrets, what it means to be an other, no matter where you go. So for her, one example is that she was obviously from Jamaica, but then her family migrated to Cuba for a time. And so I believe she was she born in Cuba? I don't remember now, but she lived in Cuba for a time, her family did, and then they ended up going back to Jamaica, and then she moved to the States where she had, like I said, lived for many years. So there's a lot of talk about that, about her relationship with her siblings and how there's a different view of her than her siblings. So like she feels she gives an example about her trying to use more patois, speak more patois, and speak more in her accent, her natural accent, when she's around her family, because she, feels like she kind of has to prove herself to them because they look at her as a Yankee or someone from the States, so she's no longer a Yardie anymore, or someone from Jamaica. And there's things that they've experienced living in Jamaica that she hasn't living in the States, and there's this view of, because she lived in the States, she makes a lot of money, and she is like living the high life while we were struggling here. Those different conversations and topics were explored in this book, and I appreciated that. I appreciated those kind of conversations. Yeah, I did enjoy this book overall. Again, I would say I gave this like a 3.5, 4-star. It was slow at some times. I feel like, and this isn't, okay, so let me say this before I say my final thoughts on this, is that a 3 is not bad. If I rate a book a 3, it means that I liked it, and that I still would recommend it to most individuals. So a 3 is not bad. So I will say that I did enjoy reading this book. I liked it. There was some parts where it was a little bit slower than I would prefer. And also at some points, I felt like I wish we would have, this felt like a very long short story versus a full novel. I may change my mind about how I feel about that as time goes on. It's been maybe a month and a half since I finished the book. But I still am thinking about some of the conversations that were had in this book and the themes that were brought up. So it's still staying with me. So I don't know, I might change my view or change my rating later down the line. Okay, let's get to the books that I read, but that I don't own, because those are the ones I'm going to forget about. Okay, Good Dirt. So this is the second book by Charmaine Wilkerson. Her debut was Black Cake, which I really loved. I read somewhere back here. Yes, it's behind my head right here. Right here. Anyways, I really loved Good Dirt. I think I loved it more on the first go around, or like the first initial reading, than I did Black Cake. Black Cake, it took me a while to read, and it took me a while to read this one too, but I think it's because of the way that Charmaine pours in so much historical references into her books that I just want to sit and like let what's going on marinate. Also, her exploration into her characters. Each of her characters is beautifully flawed, as I would like to say, that they are not perfect. They make mistakes, but there is something so endearing about them, and they aren't the way that they are for no reason, as is the case with all of us, that we don't just show up ready-made and we are like out of like a test tube or something. Like we are very complex beings, and we sometimes are a makeup of the things that we've experienced, and even the things that our parents have experienced, have passed down and passed on. And so, yeah, I think that she did a great job of exploring that. She talks a lot about grief, so definitely trigger warnings for grief, for a loss of a loved one through a violent act. All of those things, definitely be prepared, because for me personally, I have a lot of biases. There's a lot of things that were explored and talked about in this book that I haven't really experienced like firsthand, but that close enough that I really was in my feelings about it. I was really, really emotional reading this book. And I just really loved, I'm saying really a lot, I'm so sorry, but I appreciated how Charmaine is able to create these characters, create these families. And it was like a multi-generational story as well, which she kind of did as well in Black Cake, but even further back. And so we were able to see like generation to generation, and they all were interconnected. And I did appreciate how she was able to bring those characters up again in future chapters. So they weren't just introduced to us, but then we never saw them or interacted with them again. But yeah, I appreciate that a lot, and I enjoyed this book. It was my only critique, and that's why I didn't give it a full 5, was that I didn't appreciate didn't like the way that felt a little bit choppy, the ordering of the chapters. It was kind of hard to follow at times because we would go from like one perspective to the next, and there's points where the main character in the story, she's telling a story of the past, but because she's telling the story to us and we don't realize until I would say like maybe a third or halfway through the book, it's kind of hard to pinpoint where we're at, if we're in her perspective or we're actually like in the time period of the people that she's telling us about, if that makes sense. So overall, that was like my main critique of the book, but I definitely recommend it if you are a fan of Black Cake. I think it's definitely worth a try. It's not the same as Black Cake at all, and I definitely have seen a lot of reviews people saying that, but I definitely think it's worth a try to be introduced to it and see if you enjoy it. Next, I read The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. This is book 5 in the Wheel of Time series, and if you've followed my content for a while, then you know I've been reading the Wheel of Time since early 2024, I believe, and I am still trucking away at it. This is the 5th book, like I said, so I can't really share too much about it other than this is probably one of my favorites out of the series so far. I know I've heard in the past that people have said that when they get to book 5 or book 4 and 5 is like where you should know like if you're going to continue on with the series or not. And I get it now. I understand, because book 4 and 5 had the most action, most stakes. The stakes were risen to a high level. There were characters that we, love and have been following and have been getting to know these past 4 books that are, may or may not make it to the end of the book. And it was definitely a great way to set up book 6. Actually, this is my first time reading a Wheel of Time book and actually looking forward to getting to the next book. Sometimes I'll read them like, oh man, like, nothing really changed. And this one, a lot of things changed. And so I'm looking forward to reading book 6. Spoiler alert, I actually already started reading book 6 and it is good so far. I'm enjoying it. And so yeah, I might actually finish the series. I didn't expect to actually say that, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it enough. I give it a 3. Like I said, I liked it. It was still had a lot of slow parts, and the romantic stuff that goes on with Wheel of Time is always like not the best. Like you are not reading Wheel of Time for the romance, let me tell you. You're reading it for the world building and the various cultures that are displayed in it and the systems and stuff like that that's talked about. That's what you're reading it for. You're not reading it for the romance. If you're reading it for the romance, then more power to you, but I definitely wasn't. Okay, the final 2 books I'm going to talk about is actually from a duology. It is from the Raybear Duology by Jordan Ifueko. This is following a young woman who is, when you first meet her, she is kind of sequestered away from other people. She has a mom that visits her from time to time, but she doesn't really have a close relation to, but she is special. This young woman is very special. She has a special ability, and at some point she is sent away to become a member of potentially become a member of a council to a young emperor. And it's like a council of, I think it's 11 or 12 people that essentially are bonded together and are within his council for his entire life. And there is a catch though, because she has been tasked by her mother to do something very bad to this emperor or this young emperor. And that's all I will say. That might be a spoiler, I apologize, but I did really enjoy this duology so much. This is based off of African mythology, and I was not disappointed. I gave, I think the first book 4.75 stars. And yeah, I gave both books 4.75 star ratings, which is huge. I think that's the highest I've given a book without giving it a 5. And this is probably one of like 2 times that I've done this possibly. But yeah, the world building was amazing. Again, various cultures that were displayed within the book, within the systems, was really interesting. I love that there was a found family element, and we actually got to see over time, without it being too rushed or even overly stated, how these different young people were able to become close friends. And each of the characters, we got to get a piece, even if they were like side characters, we got to get a piece of their backstory and their history and why they respond to people of various cultures, or even people that look different or think differently than they do. And they were just so complex, like they were written so well that I couldn't give this book, like I could not give this book a 4.75. Now, here's why I did not give it a 5, even though I really, really, really wanted to. This is a young adult book. And I think I personally, well, I'm not a big fan of spice in general. And I'm going to say that this doesn't have like any real explicit spice. And when I say this, it's not like overly graphic or explicit or anything like that. It definitely isn't fade to black, but it isn't overly explicit. But I guess, the things that bother me is that there was a lot of like, these kids, they're kids, like this is a young adult, and they are around, I want to say 15, it starts off when they're like 11, and we see them all the way up to like, they're like 17 or 18 by the end of the book, or the end of the second book. But yeah, they're like kids, they're essentially high school kids, and they talk about, spice relations quite a lot, I think, for me, and I just feel really uncomfortable. Like we could have a whole conversation about this in another video, and definitely like in the comment section, let me know how you feel about this. But particularly in young adult books, I always feel kind of uncomfortable when I'm reading books that are with young adults, with actual teenagers, and, relations are being talked about like that, And yeah, that's the only reason why I kind of gave this book a 4.75. But other than that, it was a near perfect book. It is slept on, like, I can't believe. Jordan Franco is an amazing writer, an amazing author. She has written The Maid and the Crocodile, which is set in the same world as the Raybear series. So I will definitely be reading that, because when I finished the second book, I was so sad, because I was like, this is written so well. But thankfully, we get another book that's set in the world. So it was also a really well done duology. I didn't feel like it was rushed at all. I felt like it was, everything was well explored. Everything was kind of buttoned up and tied together very well. There was also really good high stakes in this duology. Like, people that you wouldn't think like, oh, they're gone. Wow. Like, it wasn't like a play thing at all, for sure. But yeah, those are all the books that I read so far this year. I don't think I had many misses. What is my rating system right now? I don't even know what my rating is right now. Let's see what the stats say. I am at currently a 4.39. So not too shabby, not too shabby. I haven't really been over or less than a 4 in my previous years since I've started actually rating the books that I've read. So I'm trying to keep that up. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like it if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to join the fam. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.